Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I'm glad to take your phone calls and your emails at 866-HEY-LARS. That's 866-439-5277. Emails go to talk@larslarson.com. I have a little confession to make. I've been in a lot of jails. I've been in a lot of prisons, but I've never been there as a, what do they call them now, client now. I've never been arrested. I don't have a criminal record. And so I haven't had any direct experience with the bail system, but I think it's worth talking about because there is a system by which, and Mr. Good, Ken Good, who joins me now, a noted Texas bail attorney and a board member of the Professional Bondsmen of Texas, he'll be happy, I'm sure, to correct me if I'm wrong. But if you're arrested and charged with a crime, that you have the right to appear in front of a judge within 24 hours of the first court day. So on a long holiday weekend, it might be a wait behind bars. But then the judge can decide whether or not you're going to be released on your own recognizance, or perhaps there will be bail. And bail means that somebody has to agree to post whatever amount of money the judge sets, $5,000, $10,000, $1 million, whatever it happens to be. And for that, you need bail bondsmen who effectively say, I will guarantee Lars's bail. And if he doesn't show up for his court date and I can't track him down, then the bail bondsman is going to have to pay the bill. Mr. Good, welcome to the program, and thank you so much for taking the time on a Thanksgiving Eve.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and happy Thanksgiving to you and your listeners.
Why are people talking about doing away with, or as they call it, reforming the bail system in America?
That's a really good question. I think that we have some activists on the other side who think that it's just not quote-unquote fair and forget about the whole concept is accountability. They just don't think there should be any accountability. Everybody should just be released on their own promise that they'll reappear. And as you know, as I think as people with common sense would conclude, the reason why they're involved in the criminal justice system is they're probably problem children to begin with, and problem children probably need to have their hands held as they go through the system. They get scared easily. They run easily. They need someone to give them reassurance, and also that here's what you need to be at court at this time. And I don't think any other process, I think any study would say that no one does it better than the private surety bail system. And I think there's some element of just government taking over a private industry.
But Mr. Good, what are they suggesting replace the system of a judge, for instance, saying, Lars Larson, you're held on this charge. I'm going to say $20,000 bail. So I or a member of my family, I assume, or my lawyer would have to go to the bail bondsman and say, will you post will you agree to the $20,000 bail? There's going to be a cost to that, of course. Bail bondsmen don't do it for free. And they will agree that if Lars doesn't show up in court on the appointed date at the appointed time, then they're out $20,000. And so they're very good at encouraging their clients to show up on time. What in the world could replace that? We're just going to trust everybody to show up? We're going to have runaways all over the place, aren't we?
Well, I think that the system that they're trying to replace us with is a system which we would call a PR system, a personal recognizance system, or a personal recognizance bond in Texas. And it's just a promise. I mean, it still has a financial amount, but it's still a promise and that's all. So if you forget to go, you've broken your promise. But if this what they're looking at in Harris County, Texas, they're giving them repeat PR bonds. So you're losing all accountability. The purpose of bail is you get out of jail so that you promise to come back to respond to these charges or to show up in court anytime the court requires you. This repeated giving a PR bond and failing to appear has destroyed any accountability and just creates bigger and bigger backlogs of pending cases.
Well, just for the majority of my audience who haven't been in jail, Mr. Good, though, are they saying, and your mama has to pledge the value of her house, and if you don't show up, her house is forfeit? Because that's a pretty good incentive for most people to show up. If your boss has to put up $10,000 or $20,000, I mean, even if it's not the bail bondsman, in this PR system, are you pledging anything, or just saying if I don't show up, I'm on the books owing the system $50,000, which I probably don't have anyway?
No, and a PR bond is a mere promise that you will appear, and if you don't, that you will pay $10, $100, $5,000, with no surety. There's no surety. There's nothing backing up the promise, and that's and also there's no supervision, and those are the reasons why you have such a high failure to appear rate, like in Harris County. I mean, the last statistics said they had a 50% failure to appear rate. And, when people don't show up for court, then the case gets put on hold. It's put on hold until they come back. It can be put on hold for a day. It can be put on hold for a couple of days. It could be put on hold for a month, a year, or they may never come back.
Well, and in fact, as a bail attorney, do you actually try any criminal cases yourself or defend any criminal cases yourself?
I do not. I No, I do not. My history is just in representing bail bondsmen or on bail-related matters.
Yeah, here's why I raise that issue. Because with a lot of crimes, if the criminal can disappear for a while, I know the reasonable law-abiding person is going to say, well, what good does that do? You're still accused of the crime. But tell me if it's not the case that if I'm accused of a theft, let's say, from a store, a large theft, say something worth enough money to, get me put behind bars, and I disappear for 2 or 3 years, and then I'm caught again and I'm brought back, they say, now, where are the witnesses we were going to call to convict this guy? And they're going to say, well, they've moved away, they've disappeared, they've died, their memories may be suspect at this point. In other words, the criminal comes back a few years later, may have a much better chance of beating a legitimate case against him than if he actually had to stand trial in a timely way. Fair enough?
Absolutely. We call that in our world, we call that justice delayed, is justice precluded. You can't get justice, once you have so much time passed. And another thing that's so bad about what they're wanting to do now is, the defendant can fail to appear 7 or 8 times, and he just gets rescheduled and gets new PR bonds. But if the victim, fails to show up once, then the case is dismissed because the victim is not there to testify against them. It's a system that just completely destroys the credibility for victims. I mean, there's no justice for victims anymore.
Well, let's call it this. It's a pro-criminal system, isn't it? A system that benefits the criminal even more than a lot of the American justice system, and you're the lawyer, not me, is built around presumption of innocence. The state has to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. The accused doesn't have to prove anything. And a lot of the structures built up within the system are to favor the guilty. I mean, they're to favor the criminal.
It's worse. It's worse than a pro-criminal system. It turns the criminal justice system on its face and makes it a voluntary system. Because if I can just not show up and the case gets delayed, but I don't get punished, well, then why would I ever show up? I mean, it gives me, as a criminal, an incentive. Okay, my case has been pending for 2 years and it's set for trial next week. I just won't show up. And then it's going to get put in line again to be set for trial in another 2 years when they get to it. I mean, it turns into where you're just gaming the system and you're defeating the system so that it just becomes voluntary. The only people that have their cases concluded are the ones that come in and consent to do that.
In other words,
it's ridiculous.
It only works for the people who are already somewhat law-abiding, as in, I have a court date, I have to show up. And it actually creates something lawyers call a moral hazard, where if my best interests are served by my disappearing and not showing up at court on time, then and the system built it that way, then I'm going to probably do that. You don't build moral hazards into systems where you want them to work. Mr. Good, it's a pleasure to speak with you on a Wednesday evening. Thanks so much and have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Thank you very much, sir.
It is a pleasure. That's Ken Good, who's a noted Texas bail attorney and a board member of the Professional Bondsmen of Texas.